The Indian Institute of Business Psychology is a space for psychologists working in applying the knowledge and techniques from psychology to help create sustainable and socially responsible business organization. IIBP, an accreditation body of psychometric testing, training, and coaching, employee well-being. Methodologies or processes applying knowledge and practices from psychology for the betterment of business. The Institute aims at becoming the most loved destination for practitioners of specialized knowledge and services. I would like Vijay Pandey to take over the session from here. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Asya. Thank you. Welcome all. It's always a special pleasure for being here. And it always gives me happiness because here we basically, rub minds, and sometimes very insightful and, even heartfelt discussions and conversations happen on this forum. So today we would be discussing the Great Resignation, the myth and the facts associated with that. Just to keep the discussion, let's say, little guided, a little centered around the core topic, I have created a list of a small PPT with some facts. And then our panelists, who are super knowledgeable and experienced in the area, they would be discussing about the deeper insights and experiences and reflections on those facts, and also some surrounding myth related to that. So allow me to introduce our panelists to you. The first is Laurence Barrett. Laurence is a Jungian psychologist who is applying basically, who is also coach and supervisor of coaches. He has done a lot of work in applying psychoanalytic method, especially the Jungian method, to organizational context and developing leaders, working with leaders, working with teams to improve and basically create a better and more healthy, more humane culture. Our second panelist is Mahipal Nair. Mahipal is CHRO of Nielsen, and he has been he has worked in multiple countries, multiple cultures, and managed a large workforce, which is very diverse. And he comes from an industry which is into research. So they are on top of all the knowledge and information about the current movement scenario. So his input will be very, very useful with regard to not only what is happening, let's say, in consulting organizations and research organizations worldwide, but also what is happening in almost all the sectors, because he's the person who has information from all the sectors. Our third panelist is Sunil Tripathi ji. Sunil, I did not see your video. Can you? Yeah. Yes, sir. Now I see you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So Sushil is head of HR in a solar company, which is, solar is, I think, one of the sector which is going very, very big, and it is going to be the energy of the future. So he's head of HR in Goldie Solar, and from him we expect, very insights from a forward-looking company and, the future of energy, and then how, let's say, the people aspect are looked at from that industry point of view. So I feel particularly happy and fortunate to moderate this session, because I personally have at least met or interacted with all of them, and it's always a pleasure to be in this platform. So just to open the discussion, I would like to put some facts first, and I'm going to share my PPT with you. Don't worry, it's not a kind of big or long PPT thing. It's just 10 slides. and 2 are just introductory. So the first thing here, what is Great Resignation? So the term was coined by Anthony Cloud, who is from Texas University in 2019, and he predicted at that time that workers will start to resign en masse, like in bulk, following the pandemic, as burnout and working remotely triggers a shift in people's identity. So that's the remark from Professor Anthony. And we can see that his prediction, which was in 2019, somewhere around, I think September or October it became true. So this statistics is number of people quitting their job in the United States. And this statistics is adjusted for seasonal jobs. So this is the after adjustment of seasonal job, after removing the seasonal job quitting. So as you can see that around April, there was a big surge. It was just after the first wave. And in September 2020, 4.43 million people quit their job. So this phenomenon, he termed it as the Great Resignation. And since then, a lot of things have happened in that area. Now, I would like to invite our panelist here in order to comment on this statistics. And especially, I would like to hear first from, I feel very, whether I call just Mahipal or Mahipal sir, because every time. So, okay, let me call everybody sir. So I will first invite Mahipal sir to comment on this. What is the Great Resignation and how it has been in terms of the numbers, in terms of, first let's put the facts on the table.
Yes, so hello, good evening everyone. So I would say that if you were to look at the similar trends in India, I would say that partly the reasons are a little different from what we have seen in the United States. One big reason has been that there has been growth in the job market itself. So numbers could be similar, and by and large, almost all the companies are experiencing attrition, highest ever attrition. Some companies are facing 30s, 40s, which is almost reaching to every second person leaving. That kind of a worst case scenario versus a little better, which could still be in 20s. Now, on the back of 2020, where the attrition went to an all-time low because of obvious reasons, it went up. So one was suppressed demand, and then second was the growth opportunities increasing, and the growth opportunity largely came because of number of companies investing in India, including the company, many companies that I'm aware of, our own company, because the footprint has been increased. So there is a greater demand, and in terms of sector, tech sector has seen the maximum number of job rise. So, and as we go along, we can probably reflect and debate more about what's happening. But so I would say that trends are similar, but then the reasons could be a little different.
Thank you. There are two also very interesting statistics associated with that. This is the number of people resigning. Now, this one is the number of job openings which are there. And this is the latest data that I could get from US Department of Labor. In fact, they would be publishing November statistics tomorrow. So this is up to October. So this is latest. Now you can see from October 2018 till October 21 data here. And after April 2020, when this Great Resignation phenomenon happened, after that, you can see that the demand, job openings have skyrocketed. And then this is the, putting two pieces of data together. So this is the resignation, the red line, and the blue line is hiring. Now, I would like all of our panelists to comment on these two, red areas. One event which happened somewhere around April 20, and after that. And then one which is happening now, the recent trend, is that resignation is almost all-time high on 4% around. But at the same time, hiring is also high. So I would like to hear first from Laurence and then from Sunil.
Yeah, I think I have a bit of a mixed relationship with the numbers, because I think there's a lot of data out there, but the numbers have to be seen as a sort of overall theme rather than a set of individual figures. What do we know? Yeah. We know that the global economy has taken a dent, taken a hit. We know, therefore, that there are less jobs in aggregate available. We also know that there are much more vacancies. We know that many people seem to be leaving. I think the Federal Reserve produced a statistic of 3% voluntary turnover, which is the highest they've had in 20 years. So we know that that's increasing. What seemed to happen in April was a lot of, and I think this is quite revealing, a lot of organizations panicked and laid off people in some fairly brutal ways, revealing what people have known for a long while, which is that your company does not care about you. Now, what's now happening, I think, for many people who've been fairly disengaged, fairly alienated from work, and now looking in a way at the organizations that they work in, thinking, well, my company doesn't care about me. Perhaps it laid me off, perhaps it laid off a friend of mine, perhaps it laid off a friend of mine by text in a way that seemed to be quite brutal and unfair. So I'm very aware that what is happening around me is disengaging. Now, as a result, companies are becoming, in a way, less appealing. The kind of myth that we have to have jobs has been broken, because, of course, let's also compare that with the current overall employment market. So we have a situation, I was chatting about this to my wife the other day. When I graduated, you worked in a company or you worked, as a barman. I mean, that was your choice. Now kids are graduating. You don't have to work in a company. You can set up a business. You can work anywhere in the world. You can do broadly anything you want. And I think many people are waking up to this, thinking, I don't need to do this actually anymore. And so for me, when we look at the whole aggregate of this data, what we're seeing is that people have been reminded by the way they've been treated during the pandemic that companies don't care about them. And because companies don't care about them, they're starting to think, well, why shouldn't I work somewhere else? And we're seeing a split, if you like, a division between senior leadership, who are kind of neurotically clinging to this model of, people need to work here, they believe in us, and the reality that most workers find, which is, I could do something else. I don't need the money. I don't need to live in a busy city where most of my salary goes on my commute, on my clothes, on my work. I can go and live somewhere else. I can go and do something else. And exactly as Klotz suggested, their identity is changing, and they're discovering that identity is no longer tied up with a company which, as I said, patently doesn't care about them. That would be my overall perspective.
Thank you. While looking at this number, I wonder that this is the number of separations. Now, it is possible that a large chunk of it is not a voluntary separation, but basically firing of employees by the company. And in 1 month, it's like it was almost 10%. So even the 4% headcount means 50% annual. So it's that much. Yeah. So it's a huge number. Yeah. Now, Sushil, I would like your view on this, because you are in an industry which is very kind of, energy for the future.
Yes.
In this, how much do you think it's a voluntary thing, and how much is an involuntary? Like, how much of it is firing and how much of it is resigning? And is that going to make any, let's say, difference in terms of, how HR is going to handle?
Okay. Vijay, first, let me thanks for everyone. We have chosen this interesting topic, and I actually loved myth and reality, these two words. So like Mahipal and Laurence talked about demand and the nature of pandemic and how it impacted overall employer in terms of their revenue started getting down, and they were forced to take a call on laying off employees. So with my experience of last 1.5 years and this current experience of this renewable sector, I will answer this question from three perspectives. One, earlier I was with retail sector that was drastically and badly affected with this corona or pandemic. Still it is reeling. So there this attrition was a kind of forced attrition. So I would say it was a forced. So employees had no options except to getting away from the system. Second, April onwards, yes, slowly industries started growing up, and the change in the nature of work started happening, like IT, ITS, banking, and other sectors. So suddenly demand started happening because we had options just left to get shifted or transfer everything into automated system or online portal, online mode of selling, online mode of reaching. So it helped in creating demands in IT, ITS related sectors. So they are growing demand. But for renewables, so renewable definitely it is a complex phenomena, because this industry is closely, I think there are limited powerful companies. So working is getting restructured in the sense Reliance, Adani, they are coming up with big setups. So everyone, and they are also trying to attract people from here and there. So naturally this forced resignation. So here resignation, I would say resignation. So it would be definitely voluntary in the nature. So now people would be moving to get attracted to the companies who are ready to pay higher salary, ready to pay good benefits. So to be very precise, so they would be looking at good employer value proposition. So that's how these three issues will run parallelly to each other. For some, it would be a kind of forced resignation. For some, it would be kind of demand generated, and for some, definitely it would be a realization, because like Laurence suggested, in this pandemic, people realized for them, their life, their family is at the topmost priority. So job, money, it doesn't have any real significance for them. So finally, we always call it jaan hai to jahan hai. That realization we have started experiencing. So that is the reason we are seeing even in America. So people are not having job, but they are going to rural, or they are trying to spend more and more time with their family. So a kind of psychological unrest is also happening there. People have started realizing what is the core purpose of their lives, why they are spending 8 or 10 hours at the workplace, which is least concerned about their safety. They are not feeling that kind of environment. Someone should be in a position to tell boss, don't worry, I am there. Main hu na. That kind of feeling is not experienced by the employees, and that is the reason all these are creating this kind of great resignation. Yeah.
Thank you, Sushil, for providing all these three, let's say, themes in a very lucid and clear manner. Moving on, you talked about the effect of it on different sectors, and retail was the most affected. And now let's look at some related statistics around it. These are the core statistics, and these are basically statistics related to USA.
Yeah.
Now let's look at something at global level. So first about US retailer, and then we will look at this one. And this is where I think this is the most interesting aspect, and we can have some very good insight from this. So first this one, 94% of the US retailers are having difficulty filling vacant positions. And there has been a lot of war on this on LinkedIn and on Twitter. And especially there is a group of millionaires who are against billionaires, who basically what they do is that they live on taxes. So they save taxes, they get from the government, they get a lot of tax rebates, and then these people are against those billionaires and the policies of US government to support billionaires instead of supporting poor people. So this is the numbers, and these numbers are coming from Conferry survey, that 94% of US retailers are having difficulty filling the vacant position. Now the question here, first from Mahipal and then from Laurence, is that why are they finding it so difficult? Is it shortage of people? Is it not giving decent enough wage? Or is it something else?
So I would say it will be a combination of factors. So like Sushil also alluded to, the people are increasingly realizing, especially after what happened in 2020 and also in 2021, is that whether the job that I do is worth my life or worth my time that I'm spending. Now let me answer specific to retailers. Because of the kind of opportunities that are available to people, you could possibly earn, if not the same amount of money, but through 2 or 3 assignments, because which was not like, we can call it the advantage of the gig economy, that there are options available to people, that if I need to just live, I can possibly do these 2 jobs, maybe reach 50-60% of what I currently get, and do something more interesting and live my life. Live my life closer to the family, live my life at a place which I like, where the quality of air is better. I don't spend too much time on commuting, and pace of life is also easier. All those, and then I also have a theory that maybe this is also a generation where the liabilities, and this I'm referring to across the world, the worry about having liabilities less than what it used to be earlier. Like earlier, there was a time people used to live a life of credit, and they were to have mortgages and so many things that they would worry about them, or what we call
from your speaker, there is some background noise of like that, and it is
okay. Just a second.
Is there anything which is moving? Yeah, please check once. Yeah.
Is it better now?
No, there is. Okay, still? Now this seems to be okay. Yeah.
Okay. So because of that, people are able to find options. People are kind of making a choice of better life as well as doing some meaningful work. And when the trade-off is not there, then people are definitely leaving those kind of. And when it comes to retailers specifically, these could be those kind of jobs which are making people live in larger cities, because that's where you find big retailers and big jobs, or number of jobs, not just big jobs, but number of jobs. So, and all these things are leading to a situation where people have moved away from those core center of employment, like big cities. Let's say whether in places like, if you were to look at India, places like Mumbai or such large cities. And because of this advantage of working from home, then people are even negotiating whether that option is there or not, before even taking up an interview. We are increasingly seeing those situations where the question that is asked is whether this remote working option will remain forever, or is it only temporary? And only if they say that it's forever, that they even proceed to get to the interview stage. And with all those things happening, there will be those jobs where you have the in-person need far higher than, for example, this what you have on the slide. This is a job that needs the person to be on the on the retail floor space or to be in the shop floor. There's no other way. So hence such jobs will always have difficulty in attracting candidates. And then of course they will also have, because this business is also getting impacted because of the economy around us, their ability to pay will also be limited. So they can't pay, which is another thing that is coming through, that people are asking for more money for some jobs.
Yeah, I have a related question here. Like, the pay, should it be decided on the basis of what companies or what, let's say, employer can afford to pay, or should it be decided on the basis of what is minimally required to live a decent life, irrespective of the paying capacity of the employer?
That's where this gig economy has an advantage, because there you pay as per the worth of the job plus the time that you spend.
There is some background noise.
Yeah. So what I was saying is that that kind of so that does give them an edge, because as an individual, if I were to work in 3 different type of job in a day, or let's say 2, or in a month, for example, my options are much better in terms of giving me flexibility, and also in terms of care, then I'm taking care of myself, which is another point that was raised, that which is true, that during this pandemic years, we also saw a phase of a corporate where they were interested in productivity, driving as much as possible from a person, and that led to, and that happened largely in 2020, when people were sort of maxed out in terms of what they could contribute. So the productivity went up when the world over, all the companies went work from home, and then things started opening up, and that's when people started thinking about options. And if you see, all this has happened in about a year's time. Like in your previous slide, you had this April, where obviously there were a number of jobs that were taken down by many corporates because of the pressure on their profitability and pressure on costs. So that would be my take on these couple of slides that you have. Yeah.
Thank you. Laurence, your perspective on this, like why let's say retailers are having difficult time filling the vacancies?
I think pay is a bit of a red herring. And I think it matters, but I think it also reveals an awful lot about the kind of psychology of the established commentators on business, which is all a very rational discourse, and pay is a very sort of rational idea. If you've got a lot of quite greedy people running businesses, then pay will clearly matter a great deal. I think pay is symbolic in very many ways, and I would recommend anybody on the call to Google, if they haven't seen this already, the resignation video of the Walmart employee earlier on in the year, because I think it was a very interesting speech. I mean, it was funny and it was outrageous in some ways, but it was also very revealing around some of the real underlying motivations that are driving this particular scenario. So let's look at things from a retail employee's perspective. Yeah, you get paid nothing. That's true. Which must be difficult, but people do work in other sectors and get paid nothing and still maintain some degree of engagement. Let's have a look at what else is happening for them. They're in an environment where they are effectively units of production. They have very little say. They are demotivated. They are disregarded. They are treated as though they don't matter, to be absolutely blunt, both by customers and by their own management. And Bertolt Brecht, I think, once famously said, only the poor can afford courage. And I think if you're in that sort of position, I get paid nothing. I'm treated like nothing. Why shouldn't I leave? It doesn't make any difference to me. I'm poor one way or the other. I earn nothing one way or the other. If I leave, then at least I have some self-respect. And I think there's a good proportion of what we're seeing with this, particularly in places like the retail sector, but also frankly in other sectors like financial services, people increasingly looking at their organization, simply thinking this is not worth it anymore. And organizations need to reconsider the discourse, if you like, and reconsider how they think about employment if they really want to understand why people are leaving. If I could just say one more thing, something I put on LinkedIn recently, I was doing a little bit of research and I found on the World Economic Forum an interesting interview, which was very, very revealing to me because the language used, I mean, at one point the professor concerned talked about creating organizations that allow boot camps for interpersonal relationships. And for me, if your entire mindset as a leader or a leadership commentator is that your employees need boot camps to force them to talk to each other, you do not understand the human condition. I mean, I would go as far as to say, God help your children and your families. Because I think if we want to understand why people operate as groups, as communities, as collectives, and therefore as organizations, we need to start to think about things in a slightly more human way. And if we were able to do that, this data would look very different. It would make a lot of sense, actually. When I work in retail at the moment, would I work for Walmart with them paying me what they do, treating me how they do? You must be joking. I think I'd rather die, to be absolutely honest. There are other ways to make money.
So the sense that I'm getting from this discussion is that it's not only about pay, but also the associated, like the meaning that they derive from the work and what work really worth. And does it really worth to do that kind of job?
Yeah. Can I add one more thing, actually? I think the other thing that's important to remember about the stats is this is the tip of the iceberg. You're dealing with numbers here which are suggesting actual resignations. It is entirely possible for people to resign mentally without actually leaving the organization. And I suspect that an awful lot of people have resigned, but are still taking the paycheck. And frankly, who can blame them?
Yeah, like those, exactly. Yes, that's another one like here in the next one, you see. They are considering leaving their jobs. Anybody who says that considering leaving their job is actually mentally resigned. Yeah. So before we move on to this, Sushil sir, a comment from you on why this is happening. See, and especially in retail sector, and your background has been in retail, so maybe you can shed a little more light on this.
So I will take this discussion to the next level with the limited exposure to Indian retail market per se at details. So I'm not aware about what is happening in US retails or UK. Because
so let's talk about what you have seen in India with regard to that.
So definitely. So I will stick to that point. See, if you visit any retail store, you will find that their nature of job is very tedious. So 8 hours they are supposed to stand, they are supposed to greet their visitors or customers with a smile, energy, enthusiasm. And at the end, what they are getting. So hardly minimum wage plus incentives, which are not paid to them in most of the time because there is a huge competition. So finally, even after putting their hard efforts, putting their soil, blood, everything, at the end, they are just able to meet their basic needs, roti, kapda, and makan. And most of the time, even I would not say good a support system from the organization, and particularly in this COVID period, because in retail, hiring people had been always a toughest job. Always retailers used to struggle on this front, whether it is good time or bad time. So it is nowhere related with the pandemic or great resignation. It is always there. It is a common feature of retail industry, but it is extended now. I always quote, so example of Mr. Modi, he used to tell us instead of doing pity kind of job or getting unemployed, even you can sell pakoras. So that is a typical example. For just 10,000 rupees, we are putting our lives at stake. There is no even facility to take care of your daily needs. In most of the retail shops, apart from big formats, Reliance or maybe Shoppers kind of stores where you have facilities related with your well-being. But at the most of the cases, you will not find these are met. So what are the options available to employees? So they have realized if for 10,000 or 12,000 rupees, why to take their lives at risk? It's better they can sell anything, they can work even part-time, but they will make more money. So that realization, first time in their life they experienced. And see the age group of these retail employees. They are hardly in the age group of 18 or max to max 25, except to few operation manager or head of store. So these people have nothing to lose in long term. So they have no compulsion to take care of their families. So they were just contributing to help us to take their family at little higher level. So now their fathers, mothers, they are telling them, ki, boss, be at home and find out something which you can do while being at home. So that is the reason gig working, contractual or freelancing, and even they are ready to act as a delivery boy. You see, suddenly the demands of delivery boys have increased like anything. So these are interrelated. You cannot study or you cannot understand these issues in isolation. So you have to relate everything and adopt, I would say, systematic manner. Then only you will be able to find the root cause. So that's how I feel.
Thank you. About this delivery boy, I would like to share an anecdote. I was living in Lyon, and in Lyon, what happened is that there was a group of young delivery boys. They came together and they said that, you know, why to, let's say, be employee of a company. They created a company, and it's a kind of cooperative society. And they went into groups and they used to take contract from all the restaurants they contracted, because restaurant is very local business. Like no restaurant sells 50 kilometers away. So it's a very local business. And instead of having an app like Swiggy and Zomato and whatnot, they contacted the restaurants directly. And they said that you give us the business directly. We know where the customers are in this 5 kilometer area, and we will contact the customers and we will get you the business. So you give us directly the work. And this model works so well that those big apps, they had to actually increase the price for the delivery boys to have at least, you know, a decent number to serve the existing need. So this has also caused some kind of, you know, exploration of from people looking for other ways rather than just being an employee of let's say retail app or you know, a company, or being a delivery boy in a big organization. Now, so that's just an anecdote about you know, a lived experience that I had there. It was amazing, and I was one of the delivery boys. I had a very long discussion with him once, so it gave me quite good idea about how people think with regard to, you know, work and life and other things. Now let's get to this one, like resigning mentally. This is the statistics from the Microsoft, and this is global statistics from 31 countries, 30,000 workers, and 41% of them said that they are considering leaving their job. So they have basically, you know, given up, or they have resigned mentally. And in US, this number is even higher. It is 55%. Now, there is another associated statistics with this. Only 20% of the global workforce is engaged. And here it is from the Gallup survey, where they define engaged means if ask question, okay, are you, let's say, are you engaged or not? And strongly agree, disagree, they have 5-point scale. So anybody who says that agree or strongly agree, they consider them as engaged. So that number is only 20%. So 80% are saying either neutral or disagree. And this is the last thing that we will discuss. So putting these two numbers together, what does this tell about, let's say, the current and the future of workforce? Like, for example, where are we heading to, basically? So first, as a society, as a group, society, nation large, and then we will take this statistics and talk about what organizations can do and how they can basically help building a better society or creating a better workplace. So first, let's look at these two numbers, and I would invite again this time Mahipal first to share his views, and then to Laurence, and then to Sushil.
So if you look at what Gallup's survey says, that's not new. It's been there for a long time. They've been talking about it every year. They do this survey, and this comes out that 20% are engaged, and then there is another 20% which is actively disengaged, and then large number which is. So that is not new, and some of the best companies usually have this engagement percentage at much higher level. Now, again, meaning something I alluded to earlier also, I think the last 2 years have reached to that conclusion where the trigger point has been far more stronger than before. So earlier, this actively disengage and disengage would continue to work in the company and not mentally resigning, but not leaving. And like I said earlier, one is the trigger point is far more stronger, and people are comparing between life and livelihood, and then debating whether it's worth the life if I continue in this particular job. And especially in those kind of industries and jobs where respect and care is not there, where safety and security is not enabled, and when there's no less of kindness and more thinking about productivity and profitability, then obviously individuals are questioning that. And then on the other side, there are more options, which makes it possible to earn the livelihood, maybe not as much as what they would, but then at places where that gives them space, and they don't have to, as we talked about, spend their lifetime in commuting. Now, the other part is that, and this is something I would like to hear your views and other panelists' views also, because I also see this across countries that the life of EMI is no longer a reality. That paying monthly bills, paying off mortgages, paying off loans, and because there is not much of liabilities, and the generation that is the predominant generation between, let's say, 28 to 45, which forms the bulk of workforce, is also not bothered about future investments or future saving. All this leading to this kind of situation where, and we don't know whether this will be forever or which is going, or maybe it can turn around, but it will definitely ask, and maybe a little later I would also want to talk about kind of things that organizations would have to do in order to get over this situation, because eventually the world needs the economies to continue to boost. Prosperity has to, obviously the quality of life has to also go up, and some of what has happened the last 2 years will put far more emphasis on the quality of work life as well, not just the quality of life, but quality of work life. So let's talk about that a little later, but yes, maybe let's hear from both Laurence and Sushil as well.
Yeah, actually on that I have this, that's the next question. Yeah. So yes, going back to Laurence.
I mean, I think the trend, as you say, has been going for a long while. I mean, I'm reminded there was a WEF survey in 2015, which said that 86% of the people surveyed believe we had a leadership crisis in the world today. And I think this is something that's been coming for a pretty long while. I mean, we can ignore the results or what, but at the end of the day, it's very much there. we do seem to have, therefore, an interesting inflection point. The pandemic, in many ways, has been a trauma in the kind of classic sense. It has been a discontinuous break with reality. So people have seen the world suddenly in a very different way. Not all good, quite a lot, quite bad. But when you get any discontinuous sort of break with reality, you get two typical responses. One is a kind of neurotic doubling down and a sort of obsessive belief that what you have will return to normal, and that seldom happens. But I think it's what we're starting to see in our organizations at the very top, in part because if we have a kind of disconnected, highly elite leadership group, it's not entirely surprising that they find it difficult to generate empathy for the bulk of the people who generate work for them. And then the split at the bottom is this group of people who, in essence, are starting to rediscover that the world can be very different. And you've got a number of other factors that are important here. One is, if you think about consumption, we're seeing an increasing awareness that climate change is a very dangerous and very present issue, particularly among the younger generation. And things like fast fashion, for example, are becoming less important. And if they're becoming less important and actually quite distasteful for some people, they're going to buy less. If they're going to buy less, there are going to be less jobs. There's going to be less need to work in it. You don't want to be part of a company that is an unethical, climate damaging company. Because perhaps your friends won't talk to you, and perhaps you genuinely don't believe that there is a need to buy some of those products. So the actual mechanics of consumption are changing. I think we've also started to see a very different reconnection with not just family, but I think that matters, but also community. People are thinking about how their communities operate in different ways. City I live in the UK is interesting in that we have very few chains. It's very small independent businesses. And what was one of the kind of narratives that you hear at the moment in the town is that a lot of the businesses that closed down during pandemic were the larger, global corporations. The ones that kept operating were the smaller local places, and the smaller local places have maintained loyalty as a result. And you go into somewhere like some of the big fast food chains, which I won't name, and they're largely empty. Why are they empty? In part because people don't want to shop there anymore. They're quite happy going to local boutiques which stay alive. So there's this sense of loyalty to the communities that they're part of. And I think in that sense, this is not surprising. But I think it's a really interesting wake-up call for organizations, because a neurotic sort of double downing on, we can treat people however we want because they need to work for us, because it's a good thing to work for a corporation. That's a kind of mindset of people in their 50s. I mean, it's certainly something I took time breaking myself. I think if you talk to people who are, certainly in their 30s, perhaps even into their 40s, but 20s and 30s, that's not a given anymore. There are other alternatives. They don't have to live like that. And so if you want to engage people, it's not just a question of throwing more money at them and offering them a career path, because actually that's not very engaging. I don't think it's engaging anyway.
Yeah.
I suspect we're about to enter a very new paradigm with regard to how people think about employment. This is not to say that companies, large corporations, won't be successful, but I think that it will require, in some ways, a return to a much more mutual relationship. And some companies are really good at this. I mean, if you look at, and Gravity is a very sort of extreme example, but what Dan Price has done over there is to create, first and foremost, a contract between the people who work for him and with him. And that's changed how people look at the organization. So I suspect many people are starting to think a lot more about, well, what am I part of here? Community is a very human thing. It's a transcultural issue.
Yeah, true. And with this, I also see that there is going to be a change, whether corporates want it or not. There is going to be, if they don't proactively go for change, it will be forced on them. And there is a trend coming up, which is like, it's happening in Japan these days. They say flatten up, means do not buy more than you need. Do not aim at, a upward curve, but aim at a flat curve where you are not increasing the load on the environment, on the society, on the earth. And this is a new thing which is happening. It's too early to comment whether, how fast, how good. And, again, you see, I am thinking from that mindset of even, growth in this. So, yeah, so, but it's inevitable, like that kind of change is happening. Sushil ji, any comment, a comment from your side before we move on to the next question on this? What business leaders can do about it?
See, Vijay, points are already covered by Laurence and Mahipal, but I will answer this from my own experience as an employee and as well as a head of HR who are interested with the responsibility of ensuring engagement and retaining people. What I have felt, these 20% numbers since inception, engagement ratio is 15 to 20% only. So for me, this really doesn't make any sense. This is a kind of just buzzword or jargon. So for me, I always focus on alignment. I always believe with the Indian philosophy, mind is a fickle. So chanchal dimag se you cannot expect people should be engaged. Second, in most of the cases, we choose job just to take care of our day-to-day daily activities with taking care of other related things, gadi, ghoda, bangla, that kind of thing. So Western culture and Indian culture is very different in this case. Typically, Indian population, most of the people are still living at the level of roti, kapda, makan. Even if you are in Mumbai and earning maybe 40, 60 lakhs, still you cannot afford more than one house. So 1 BHK or 2 BHK kind of things. So we are not far away from roti, kapda, makan. So these issues are really not very important for us. In business, there are just two things, relations and revenue. So probably post that business HR or strategic HR partner, that concept, this relationship or the core purpose of humanity or human values has taken backstage. And even your existence in the organization is being justified just by the revenue or the contribution to the business. So from psychological perspective, you see, employees are not satisfied. They are not happy. They are not liking their job. They are not liking the way they are treated. They are not liking how they are being treated at the work place. So entire employee experience is being challenged. So it is not making them happy. It is not giving them a real smile. So we are forced to wear a kind of mask. So this mask, when you get any serious threat on this, it is exposed. And that is the reason, even I have worked closely with CEOs, they are always on the verge of looking opportunities. So I never say these are engaged or that are going to continue with the organization. There is a thin line, or like Laurence was discussing about inflection point or culmination. So once you cross that, then you finally decide to leave the organization. That's how I feel.
Thank you. Thank you. Now we have like almost 5-7 minutes for the next question, and then we will open it for the whole group. They can ask question directly to panelists, or they can ask question to any one of us. But before that, the last question. 66% of business leaders say they are considering redesigning office spaces for hybrid work. And then remote work is a top priority for Gen Z and millennial employees. Now, personally, I must declare that I have a kind of negative bias against these labelings because they don't mean anything, but they are useful. Like if you have to do statistical analysis and you have to make a clustered bar chart, you need to have these buckets. You have to make buckets somewhere. So it is an inevitable thing for data analysis. But having said that, this is what let's say new generation wants, remote work. That's like their top priority. And then some jobs are there where remote work is not possible. So the question to each one of you is that what would be, let's say, the future of workplace, a future workplace, how it would look like? And let's say if you have to give an advice or a suggestion to those who own and operate businesses about designing, let's say, the ideal kind of workspace, how it would look like.
So I think the first on the work design part itself, so there is going to be that one extreme where there will be some companies who will have to work from office because of the nature of the work or nature of the business. And then the other extreme will be those who will permanently opt for working from home because they can afford to do so, and they have the systems and processes that enable them to do, which the whole world has experienced, whether for the last 2 years or for few months in these 2 years. Then in that work design itself, even if you talk about those who will have to be in office in some manner and form, because in these two spectrums or these two extremes, there will be those organizations or most organizations who will choose hybrid work model, whether for collaborations or for just having a social space to meet and have the team bonding. The focus of these companies will have to be making the work processes simpler by infusing technology, automation, because the whole world needs to focus more on increasing simplicity over the complexity. The reason that people are leaving and the reason you find this whole thing about great resignation is also because people find the job to be too complex. And there is hardly any effort to simplify the work process. And you can talk about any, and in fact, there are people who still thrive on making the job more complex because they want to avoid their own, the job redundancy is a concern, and some people will just stick on to certain processes being more complex because that's how they get value out of it. So the whole ecosystem has to go more simpler. I personally think that we still don't spend as much time on increasing simplicity as we should be, and that's what. When it comes to design part, it's just not about how the workspace would look like, but also about the processes. So even if companies where there will be some percentage of employees will have to be in office, they will have to focus on that. And even though gig economy or gig jobs may not be a career on its own, the reason they still are able to thrive and get so much more people attracted to those is primarily because they are simpler. Anyone can take up. There is no barrier. There is no skill barrier. Maybe some jobs will need at least driving, but which seems to be a common denominator anyway. But other than that, there will be, and I'll just be quick, rewards have to become better, because not all the jobs pay for what the value that company drives. There are fewer companies who do that, and also do it in a way which is more socially responsible, which Laurence also did, because companies will have to become social enterprise. So when I was talking about work design, even the social responsibility part will have to come in. Then third part, which is something Gallup also talks about a lot, which is recognition. People, whether people get valued for what they do. So one is getting the right kind of remuneration or compensation for it, but also the feeling of being valued versus what we have seen, that people have found that organization to be only interested in profits or only interested in productivity. So the kindness or the care or compassion has gone missing. Versus that, how do you increase the recognition, or how do you how do you make employees feel more valued? And then lastly, I would say that in what is in it for me? Am I getting anything? Am I growing? Am I learning? And is there a career path for me? So then when the focus is on me, then I feel important. I feel valued. I feel that somebody is taking care of me. And I have a system where I can grow. So all these four things coming together is a possible way of working around this whole attrition space. And it's not new. Like I said, that this has been there. And we as a companies not only have to overcome the attrition space, but also make sure that people are, when they are there with their heart and with their mind both together.
Thank you. That provides a kind of very broad framework and overview of right from the physical spaces to also creating employee-centric spaces. Laurence, your comment on that, and especially from the the psychological point of view, is that given that the meaning of work has been changing, and what the role of work in larger life is changing, opportunities are changing. It was not possible, let's say 20 years ago, to even do the IT admin job remote, but now it is possible. So given that, how would a future workplace, a conducive workplace look like?
Well, I think the question about hybrid is the wrong question, and it sort of displays a little bit about the mindset of the sort of commentators talking about it, and why this is becoming so important. Because for many people now, I mean, hybrid work is just what you do. It's like asking about should we use pens and paper or computers. I mean, they're just old-fashioned questions which are based around a particular way of working. Because if you think about the hybrid, I mean, I know people who, let's look at it this way, are very keen, very tech savvy, young, able to work in a hybrid way. And I also know people in that space who are effectively working on a laptop on their beds in a tiny little shoebox somewhere in a block of flats. And it's not fun. They miss the contact. Then you've got the introverts and the extroverts. I love working remotely, and I'd be very, very happy if I didn't meet anyone face to face probably ever again. But other people love being part of teams. They like mixing. So it's not really about hybrid or not hybrid. I think what is interesting is about the soulful sort of human nature of our workspaces, because you go into most offices, and we talked a bit about culture, but let's be honest, the one thing the world manages to have in common is that we have a wonderfully dehumanizing work culture generally across the world, in virtually every country you visit. And it's banks and banks of desks sort of sitting in essence, what are kind of modern factories and mills. And they're not fun. I mean, they're not good places to work. And I think what we probably need to be thinking more about is less about hybrid or not hybrid, but more about how do we create an opportunity for people to contribute in their work, which makes sense, which feels good, which does good work. People want to do good work. And most people know where they can do the work. I mean, Mahipal made a really interesting point about process, because an awful lot of corporate processes are more about shoring up the kind of neurotic needs for control of senior leaders than they are about actually producing good work. And many people that I talk to in the course of consulting, if their senior leadership just got out of the way, went on holiday for 6 months, they'd actually be much more effective than they are currently. So I think the real clue for organizations is ask people, involve them. What sort of workspace do they want to work in? What would make them more productive? If they spend time asking people, two things happen. Firstly, those people do have some good ideas and may actually create their own workspace in a much more efficient and effective way than senior leadership could do. But secondly, the act of asking is incredibly important. And coming back to Mahipal's point at the end, people need to know they matter. They need to know that they exist, that they're important. And when we tell them how they are going to have to work, what we're doing is telling them that they don't matter. And that's a recipe for disengagement. If we ask them how they want to work, and we find a way of creating a dialogue within an organization about what a good office space for that business looks like in the context of how people are, culturally, industrially, all of those various factors, you're not only designing an organization which is probably more fit for purpose, but you're telling the people in the business that they matter enough for you to ask them the question in the first place. And I think that's, if the business leaders can spend more time asking these questions and involving their people, they will get more engaged workers simply by asking.
So rather than having a top-down organizational design, have it basically started by asking people that in the context of their work, in the context of their organization, the team, how would they like to work? How would they like to structure their work, and build the design from bottom, from like that? Did I get you properly?
And that doesn't mean giving them what they want all the time, because we're all adults in organizations, and people know they can't have everything they want, but what they want is to be asked and to believe that they matter enough to have an opinion.
By the way, Laurence, this is a very good parenting advice also. I practice it with my kids, is that I don't give what they ask, but I definitely ask them what they want.
Yeah.
And I have been advised by many kind of senior parents who have much more experience than me in parenting. And they always said, like, negotiate with your child, spend time, talk to your child. Don't kind of just think for them, think with them. And I have found it very, very practical and useful. And just like I have been running a remote company for last 11 years, and all my employees are remote. And we have been working fantastically, very well. It's a small company, small setup, everything, but it works very well. So, yeah. Sushilji, coming to you. What would be, let's say, a better design for organization, for workplace or space going forward?
So basically, nature of job will define, because if COVID is there, it is not a kind of perpetual thing. So finally, the work itself is going to define which kind of work spaces we are going to create for the people. And definitely it will vary from city to city. See, if you are aware about Mumbai, so from Lower Parel to Goregaon, you will see the structure of offices most of the time are decided by their rented or their rents actually. So higher the rent, organizations are ready to squeeze their even sitting spaces with their people. So finally, it is nowhere related with, I would say, hybrid work or COVID or something, because some works are there that can be outsourced. So if it is purely related with IT, ITS, or maybe consulting in the nature, then you can be movable. But consider factory or manufacturing setup, you cannot afford to be online. So people have to be there within the premise, and accordingly, this office premises need to be customized. So I don't see any future for hybrid, except to very few, 10-15% of the workforce. So that is the only possibility.
So in the renewable energy business that you are in, how you see the workplace being structured going forward? Like, will it go back to more like what it was in 2019, or will it be different in 2023?
No, see, COVID has no impact in real sense. So that is the reason I am very firm on my conclusion, because I am coming from background where we were making some products. Even at the time of peak of COVID, we took permissions from the government agencies, but we ensured at least whatever precautions are possible that must be created or offered to employees, and then we were running after our employees. We were providing bus services, we were providing food facilities, and even a temporary kind of accommodation facility to take care of these things. So renewables again is not going to be changed. Yes, consulting or advisory services related with renewable can be definitely worked from home, but primary nature of the job itself demands people must be at the shop floor, people must be with the dealer, distributor, people must be with their people. That's how this industry is growing.
Mhm. Yeah, so for an industry which is so much, let's say, connected with the ground, the hybrid and remote is a remote possibility, and it's not a foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. So we had three different perspectives on that, and I liked the way we put it and the way it was put on the table. Now I would like to close the share and open the floor for all the people, just to announce some kind of ground rules. In order to ask a question to any of the panelists, please raise your hand, unmute yourself, put your video on if possible, like if you're not sitting somewhere where you would not like to be seen, then ask your question and then go on mute. Please, the floor is open to all.
We've stunned everybody into silence.
There was a time when I was very uncomfortable with the silence, but now I am comfortable. Okay, I see one hand raised, but I don't see who. Okay, Per. Yeah, please.
So someone's got to kick this off, right? No, but I'm thinking there's a couple of things here. Let me start with, first of all, is that 66% of companies considering hybrid work. From my perspective, you would be silly not to consider it. It's basically broadening the ways you can solve whatever issues, whatever tasks you have at hand. So, I mean, not considering that would be even scarier from my perspectives.
I would like to add to this. I also run a company which is in real estate, and that does much better business than my HR consulting, because real estate gives more money than HR consulting anyway. Psychology doesn't give you much money. So, so we had some machines which were broken during the pandemic. And then the engineer sent the solution through video call and by video recording. And the local machine operator, did those steps and got the machine working. Now, I would have never even thought that this is possible. Those people, they talked to each other, they got on the video call and they got it done. So I see a fair possibility of many things for which human presence was required to be taken, let's say, on online medium or remote. The human touch will still be required, because otherwise, what's the point of doing all this? But yeah, the work can happen even in the industries where we think that that's a remote possibility, or that's not. Yeah. So that has been my experience in this.
And that brings me back to the point I made in the chat, that I'm working for a Danish company that works on employee engagement surveys. And what we are seeing is the companies that are doing this well, they aren't discussing 3-2 rules or anything like that. They are letting teams discuss what are the tasks at hand that we are trying to solve, and which solution is best for us. Sometimes we will sit at home, say we're writing a report, etc., but it's having those discussions and being focused on what is it that we are trying to solve and how do we do that best way possible. If you're having that discussion, 2 thumbs up. But if you're talking about rigid 3-2 or whatever, then you're missing the whole point.
Yeah. Absolutely agree.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is very interesting point from Cornelia. Should I just read it? Okay. Yeah, Sujit, yes.
Okay, hi. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My point over here is that, we humans are hardwired, so to say, for survival. In the current age, we need money. Survival is equal to needs and jobs is equal to needs. That's what I also shared in the chat box.
Yeah, I saw that.
How much ever we talk about understanding or empathizing with the employees, and getting them to feel engaged with the organization, it all boils down to the hard fact of whether they are able to meet their basic needs and whether they feel safe in being around with the same employer for a longer time so that they are able to meet their basic needs. If that threat is removed from the context, I think they'll feel safer and they'll be able to work around with us for a longer time. My question is, how important it is at this point in time to talk about how to make them feel safe, because threat is something that puts all of us together and fight the threat against it.
So who would you like to address first?
May I request Sushil to?
Yeah. Sushil, sir.
Just a minute. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, so Sujit very aptly asked this question. So I'm on the similar page, but would answer it very differently. See, I have been always a firm believer of this thought. Instead of relying on others, we have to take care of ourselves. So if you cannot go outside, it's always suggested you go inside. So pandemic has done one beautiful thing. At least we found a lot of time in reflecting. No one is there to take care of your well-being, whether it is money, because organization can take at any point of time such kind of call which were never anticipated in the past. Your salaries are going to cut drastically. Even you have given them 15-20 years, they will not take I would say a single second to take a decision that this person is not required in the system. So instead of relying on other support system, whether it is from organization or from even your close relatives, so you'd have seen if you are COVID patient, even your family member is not ready to touch you. So that realization, first time in life we are experiencing. So that is the reason I always tell. So I always praise Indian thought process. Mat kar abhiman re bande, jhoothi teri saan re. So it is the time when you have to go back to your core values. So instead of telling this, we'll conclude with this point. I always tell, ki aaye the Hari Bhajan ko otan lage kapas. So why to get into daily roti or kapda makan? Work on yourself, your upliftment, whether it is skill upgradation, updation, or whatever. Focus on yourself. That is the only guarantee to take care of you.
Thank you. That was lovely. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sushil ji. In
Danish,
fact, it is quite ironic, despite the reality, the masses do not really give heed to the values, but they, more focused on the.
In fact, exactly what Laurence was also saying is that the meaning, like what it's worth and why, that aspect has to be put into the center.
The
And that's
purpose.
what Mahipal was saying when he said that, the design should be the employee-centric design and not like the other way around. Yeah, Danish. And after that, Kavita. Yeah.
Thank you, Vijay. I just had one question. I think one of the areas which we haven't discussed is around the pay equity issues in the organization, especially if you look at the pay what we are offering to our entry-level staff versus what we are paying to the CEOs of the organization. Now, we spoke about retail in greater detail, and I think that's a big problem in the retail that, when we are hiring people at the store, what salaries are we offering versus what the top executives of the companies are getting the salary. So that is one aspect which I just wanted to have a view from the panelists, what they think about it. That's question number one. Question number two is around, talking about the work designs which you're talking about. Now, personally, my personal bias is towards creating a more open culture, more participative culture where people can come together. And that's how the humans have been formed. They come together and they talk and they discuss rather than working remotely. Hybrid is, yes, is something which is there. How much is this, quote unquote, a Western concept of a hybrid culture or a remote culture where some of the countries who are really struggling with their populations are coming up with this concept vis-a-vis the Eastern world, which are high in population number, and they need more employment generation at the mass level. So these are two questions from me.
So the first one, as I understand it, it's about the difference between the pay at shop floor and pay at CEO level. Who would you like to address it?
Anyone? I just leave it to Mahipal. Maybe he can go for it.
Mahipal, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Danish. So, Danish also happens to be from our university. So
yeah, I was happy to see he has not changed. He's still, the young, charming, despite 20-year, almost 18-year past.
Yeah,
he's exactly the same.
Yes. So, see, different countries have adopted some sort of a check and balance between the CEO salary and that's an entry level, to put it into the two extreme spectrums. I think in Western countries there is a much stronger check and balance, I would say, compared relative to what we see in the Eastern side, specifically in India. So that gap does exist, and exists for a variety of reasons, and which is, I would say, is not new. And that may, again, if you were to relate to the topic today, that may not be driving this, but certainly there is a case for organizations passing off bulk of what they generate as profit to the people who work for them. So, and when you see some of these new age companies, including startups and companies who are becoming unicorn, you see a greater responsibility in that sense, that they are willing to share not just the profit, but also part of the company. And that's why the startup ecosystem works very differently, because I'm not saying that's good or bad, but then work culture again can be a challenge over there as well. But then at least there is greater participation of wealth that you generate. So, and hopefully even the larger organization would understand, and it will start parting with the equity that they have with, and therefore the gap will get reduced. But yes, one thing, if I have to only focus on India, the entry level compensation will go all time high in the next few months itself. It's already going up. It will go up further. That will put pressure in the short term for the companies, but in longer term, it will definitely be a good for economy. But in terms of check and balance, I haven't seen any too much of effort over there, other than what startup ecosystem will eventually influence the larger organization to part ways from their profit and distribute, because that will also, apart from the other changes that need to happen more in terms of the job itself becoming more meaningful and the company itself is becoming more social enterprise. I think that's something that will happen over time only. So, yeah.
Thank you. Danish, in interest of time, if we can drop your next question and put it in the chat box, I would like to put it up, and maybe we can include that in the follow-up article that we will write on this. And we can go to Kavita because we have only like 2 minutes, so maybe we can extend for a couple more minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Vijay. Thanks a lot. My question is, from whatever that we discussed today, I understand that, there is a need for the employees to feel valued, right? Irrespective of whatever situation they are in, whether it's hybrid or whether it's remote. But if you look at the organization practices today, a lot of it is a number game, right? Like, for example, if we talk about the span of control from a manager perspective, we say that, we see probably a lot of managers some managers managing a lot of employees under them, say 20 people, a person is managing 20 people. But then in the remote work setup, you also see the increase in connection is even more important. Or if you look at our performance management systems, or if you look at top talent, we say that focus on 20% of the employees rather than the entire organization. So I'm just what I'm trying to understand, or rather what I would like to understand from the panel is, what do you feel about this sort of polarized probably needs or practices, and what do you think organizations to do to sort of balance this out?
Yeah, for this, I would like to invite Laurence.
I think one of the things that's kind of interesting about the corporate world, the organizational world, is that we use words without really examining what we mean by them. And a lot of what is said doesn't tend to bear a closer examination. I mean, we've talked about culture, for example. I kind of don't really think that most of what is said about culture is true most of the time when we really look at it. And I think there's a risk with polarization, which is we move into solutions and outcomes which are not really well examined. There tend to be truisms, and truisms which usually reveal the psychology of the people sort of pushing those particular perspectives. The truth is usually more complex, and in a context like this, it's incredibly complex. I mean, we are dealing with an interconnected global world where technology is real. It's genuinely happening, so the possibilities of hybrid are real, and yet at the same time we have human beings overlapping with that. We have changes to the social system, to the trade system, and we haven't genuinely seen change like this in the world in I don't know, since the demise of colonialism. I mean, it's a fundamental change to our economic system, and I think in that sense any polarization is very dangerous, because it will lead itself towards unexamined, superficial conclusions, which will generally be proved wrong. I think I tend to focus much more on what do we need as human beings to enjoy life, to be healthy, to be happy. You talk about children. I think this is always an interesting thing to go back to. So what do we need as human beings? One, we need to be noticed. We just need to be noticed. Two, we need narrative. We need a story that makes sense of things. When we're going into this incredibly complex environment, businesses, people, parents who can provide some sense of order are going to be much more interesting to be around than people who can't. And the third thing is we need to know that we can matter. We need hope. And so all of the things like culture, money, hybrid, non-hybrid, I think they're all red herrings, because I think the real issue is the organizations that are able to talk to people, create a narrative that gives hope and the possibility that the people connected with that organization will be able to find a way through are going to be the organizations that are not only commercially successful, but they're successful in terms of building engaged, loyal, interested workforces. They are in a way, I might use the term, they are therapeutic workplaces. They're places you want to be because they're good for you. And so if we start building richer conversations, examining our terms a little more, I think things are going to be easier, if you see what I mean.
Perfect.
I don't know if that answered your question, Kavita, but that was what I was thinking as you were talking.
Yeah. In some, I mean, I understand it is definitely a little complicated because there's so many factors involved. Yes, but you know what I was really, what I sometimes also feel is that these things take time, right? Like, so I was thinking, so you know, some of the managers in my team, for example, they spend so much time now talking to the employees that they feel burnt out, because the need to now talk more and, you know, connect more is so important. But at the same time, you know, the organization is also thinking about productivity, right? So you can't have you can't really have more than a lot, you know, certain amount of people in your team. So that's where I was coming to, you know, like so that's why I was like, how do we balance out this whole productivity numbers, but at the same time, you know, giving people time to form those connections and you know, make those connections.
Yeah, but the answer in that still lies with conversation. I mean, I see this an awful lot in supervision, and I'm not probably the right person to ask this question to, because when I was in corporate life, I did quite comfortably say, no, I'm not doing that to senior people, and it really didn't cause me too many difficulties. But I think we need a genuine conversation within organizations from the very top to the very bottom about what is possible and why it is possible. People will work hard if they believe the organization cares for them. They won't.
Very true. Very true. Yeah.
And if we're able to have that conversation, it becomes much easier, because otherwise what you're asking line managers to do is pitch an idea that is fundamentally unsellable. So in other words, you know, if my role is tell your people that they must work 4 times the hours for less pay, ruin their family lives, their children will hate them, and by the way, we'll probably fire them next year anyway because we don't care. Sell that as a motivational idea. No one's going to buy that. Not really. Whereas if you're able to say to people, look, the company does care about you, this is what we're trying to do, it's good work, it makes sense, it's important stuff, we pay you as fairly as we can, the CEO is paid on a multiplier, and that feels fair. If there's a sense of fairness and dialogue within an organization, those organizations will ultimately be more successful, and they won't find themselves subject to the levels of disengagement and turnover that we're starting to see. And I think that's a cross-cultural thing. I think, you know, some nations are lucky in the sense that they have an endemic poverty, which means they can exploit people more. But is that necessarily a healthy, useful way to do business? I don't think it is. This is a human issue, and the more conversation we have, the healthier we'll be.
Yes,
I think that's the perfect point to kind of conclude this panel discussion. And thank you so much for all the panelists, and thank you so much to all the participants who joined today. And just to let you know what is going to follow is that we will go through the recording. We will cut off the noise and other things and make it a little crisp and kind of more, you know, the question by question and theme by theme. And then we will put it on IIBP YouTube channel. We'll publish an article with the main findings. So it would be basically also in text format for people, and it will be shared with all the people who registered. So this is the post-processing of this session. And I'm sure that this will spark many conversations. And Laurence, you said you concluded it, you know, amazingly. Like I will take that. It's like, you know, I would like to kind of live with that taste and savor it and kind of, yeah, just enjoy it. Thank you so much to all of you. Thank you so much, Sushil sir, for joining us. It was very, very interesting to listen to your perspective, which is directly, I can see that it's coming from the ground, it's coming from the experience, it's coming from the hustle of rubbing shoulders with people. Thank you so much, Mahipal sir. You have been always generous for, for joining us on such a short invitation and sharing not only, let's say, from your perspective and experience, but also from the perspective that you are sitting of being in a research organization. Thanks a lot for being with us. And I'm sure I'll hope you all. I hope to see you all on LinkedIn, in chat, in one-to-one discussion and all. So thank you so much. Thank you very much for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank
Great
you.
to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahipal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Namaste.